like to call our April 9th Scott County Fiscal Court meeting to order. Appreciate you all being here with us. This is the last time that I want to read this disclaimer, because I'd like next week on the 22nd to be able to, and I would open this for further discussion later, but on the 22nd, have 50% occupancy of the public. And, you know, Dr. Miller has said that that would be acceptable, and she recommended asking folks to wear a mask and then having, 3 feet apart, setting those. I think everybody in this room, I haven't polled everybody, but I have a general feeling that no one would object to that. So I'm going to get our meeting started. For today's meeting, as a result of the state of emergency declared by the governor of Kentucky due to the global COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the recommended mandated precautions related thereto, the following meeting notice is issued. This meeting will be hosted from the Scott County Courthouse, 101 East Main Street, and this is being broadcast live through the Scott County Fiscal Court YouTube page. Public attendance will not be permitted at this meeting due to the contagious nature of COVID-19 and social distance requirement. With that said, going back to my earlier, I believe that we should look at opening up the meeting on April 22nd, and I would, that's my plan. And if you all have any additional questions or comments, you talk with me and we can talk about that. We've called to order. I'd like to ask everyone to join me in the pledge. Mr. Elson, you lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Stacy Hamilton, would you call the roll, please?
Present.
Here.
Hold up, Stacy. We can't hear you real well. All right, let's try again.
Here.
Mr. Wallace?
Here.
Mr. Foreman? Here. Mr. Ellison?
Here. Here. Here.
Here. Stacy, can you hear us clearly?
Yes.
All right. With that said, I'll turn your attention to agenda item number 4, the minutes from our previous meeting. Is there any questions or comments related to those as presented? Motion from Mr. Rick Hostetler. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from David Livingston. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, number 5, transfers as presented in your packet. Any questions or comments related to those? Motion from Mr. Rick Hostetler. Second from Mr. Alvin Lyons. Any other questions or comments in regards to those transfers? All those that approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 6 on your agenda, bills and hand checks. Any questions or comments in regards to those as presented? Motion from Chad Wallace, second from David Livingston. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Let the record reflect that Sheriff Tony Hampton submitted fees in the amount of $92,435.38. I'd also like to add an additional note let the record reflect that the clerk, Rebecca Johnson, submitted fees of $228,847.75. With that said, we're gonna move down to number 8. Kim Rice is joining us from Parks and Rec. She's gonna talk to us about Land and Water Conservation Fund grant request.
I'm here to request approval from Scott County Fiscal Court for the opportunity to apply for a Land and Water Conservation Fund grant to address the issues we have at the Brooking Park Playground. The playground is 21 years old. The initial cost of the playground was $563,000. The maximum amount on a Land and Water grant is $250,000 with a match of $250,000. It's a 50-50. I did request the entire project in my capital request for fiscal year 21-22 with the hopes that we can offset that cost with this grant application and possibly another grant application through the state.
What questions does anyone have? Yes, sir.
And I don't have an issue with this, but my question is, why in the world is the city paying for half of a county park renovation?
If it goes through my budget, it's 50-50. If it goes through your budget, then it's all.
Because I would not wanna pay for any of the softball field renovations within town or baseball field renovations within town, because they own that property and we're investing money in property that they own. It's not like the pavilion, which they own, but it is part of.
But just like what we traditionally always do, you know, Parks and Rec makes a budgetary request, and then separate from that, they also make a capital
Can we go back
request.
and ask for half the money on the bathrooms we built out there?
David, I don't think
I mean,
retroactively we can do that.
Well, see, my point, I would say that facetiously, but my point is, if we're building things out in our park, I don't understand, we can't pick and choose what we're gonna ask for them to pay and what we're not gonna ask for them to pay. We spent $135,000 approximately on bathrooms out there, but we didn't ask for them to pay. We, I believe, renovated and put new lighting out at baseball field. We didn't ask for them to pay for that. Either we pay for our stuff or we split everything on our parks.
Well, just think about it like this. What has the city paid for with their parks that have come out of the parks budget that the county has contributed half to?
That's what I don't know. That's where, I mean, you know, so.
And the on Lyle Road complex, if we're looking at, that's right in front of you all that I've showed y'all today.
Yeah.
The city and county went together to purchase that.
Right.
That at one time, but we have not continued the maintenance. Well, Parks and Rec continue the maintenance, but as far as in capital improvements, it's a county park, so the county has assumed financial obligation to that.
I think it's addressed, David, in the interlocal agreement for parks. I can't remember exactly what it says about funding for different, city and county.
It's addressed in the interlocal agreement.
Do you know what it says, Kim?
It's whatever the city contributes to the Parks and Rec budget, the county contributes to the Parks and Rec budget, and we're tasked to maintain the parks.
But
Whether
I'm
it's
saying
city
it
or
addressed,
county.
like, county-owned property and city-owned property and
Well, when it comes to things like grant requests, I have to go to the entity that owns that land to make that request. But I can do capital improvements in my budget, or each individual entity can choose to do capital improvements in their parks.
Right, but what I'm getting at is you're asking for the approval based on the city funding half of it.
Yes,
Is that because you're applying it as Parks and Recreation and it's a joint 50-50?
yes and no. The application actually comes through Scott County Fiscal Court, so I will be coming back to have those documents signed at the time of application. But say, other grants that I've applied for that were land and water that were city property, I did the same thing except went through the city.
I see.
It just depends on who owns the land. This is just permission to move forward with the process because my deadline is in May and.
I just wanna clarify, I don't think it's appropriate, from my perspective, to vote on something that is assuming the city's gonna kick in half of it.
Well, sounds like we can have an interlocal meeting. But with that being said, I think it's also important to note that we have land and water grants on Brookings Park, I'm sorry, on Sutton Field. We also have it on the tennis courts.
Once you have land and water in a park, it
But
is the entire perimeter of that park.
Okay.
But there is also land and water in this initial playground that was put in.
oh, okay, so it was
Yes.
originally applied for, okay.
Yes,
So they'll do it again,
yes,
another grant?
yes. This
Is
is a
that-
renovation instead of a construction.
Okay.
The, one question I have is if you don't get the grant, will you still move forward and expect the full amount for both entities?
The issue with the playground is that it is having reoccurring safety issues. I think it's important to the community that we are able to move forward regardless of whether we apply for the grants total. Because there's also about $75,000 from the state that I'm looking to apply for too, but we've already passed that grant cycle.
So let's just play if ifs and buts were candies and nuts, that deal. If you apply, if we approve for you to apply, and the city didn't join in for some reason, they didn't fund, then would we just build a smaller playground? I mean, or you
We
would
could.
ask us for more money?
We could build a smaller playground, yes, yes. Brooking Park is our most used playground within our system. It is where the community goes to play. What you're looking at here is a 6 to 12 apparatus. What we have at Brooking Park is a 6 to 12 and a 2 to 5, so it's all age groups. I'm intending on keeping some of the younger and actually moving this playground to another location on the park, just down from the dog park, if it's possible. In the 21 years that that playground has been there, a small spring has opened up, and it washes away all of the mulch under that area, and it becomes very challenging to make sure that we have the proper surface attenuation for the playground. So we are looking at the possibility of moving it to a different location. What you see in front of you is just the first go round on what we would like to see in the playground, but we can adjust the cost and we can adjust the apparatuses based on what we're able to physically.
What's the timeline on this, Kim? When's the deadline for application? And
May 31st is my deadline for application.
May 31st, and then what's October? Maybe know something.
September, October, in pre-COVID world, yes, is when I would know.
Now, would you feel more comfortable if we tabled this and asked Kim to reach out to Mayor Prather? And is that what you're?
Well, I'm just thinking that this isn't something we even considered a $250,000 expenditure within the budget.
Well, this is in her budget that we're gonna pay for through, if we approve the level of request that she's made from Parks and Rec. And while we're talking about it, my hope is that we can have a special called workshop on Thursday afternoon, 3 o'clock, this coming Thursday, just to lay out the budget. That gives us a full week for questions and answers and edits before we present the first reading budget on the 22nd. Would like to have our first reading on the 22nd. So we've seen the Parks and Rec request. No one else in the room's seen the Parks and Rec request. My hope is to share that next week. We can chew on that and look at it and then make a decision on how we want to go forward.
And if the grant does get approved, I can also do a budget amendment in order to lower that capital request when that comes through.
Well, and my concern isn't the playground, because the playground's got, and my concern is not the grant. My concern is, again, we've done so many things out of that park, $35,000 for the bathrooms, the renovation down by the baseball field.
Show barn.
Resurfacing of tennis courts. I don't know if we paid for that or if that came out.
That came out of my budget.
Okay.
I believe, that was before my time, but I understand it came out of my.
So, I mean, you know, it's got that scenario where there needs to be a clear-cut line of who pays for what. Not just, because at that point in time, in all actuality, we're not really keeping up with what the full budget is for Parks and Rec. Because if you're building bathrooms and you're putting up other stuff, that needs to be included as expenses for upkeep of our parks.
Well,
And that, even though it's not in the Parks and Rec budget, that is an expense that we're spending towards our parks. And so what do we actually spend on our parks?
Along those same lines, you know, Dr. Wallace just mentioned, you know, the rendering that you have, the preliminary plan that this body approved to have an architect do,
Right.
you know, just my thought process was, we own that property at Lyle Road. And that's why I proceeded for improvements just from us. I didn't go to the city and ask the city for half.
Right.
You know, kind of along the lines of what you're talking, maybe I should have.
Well, but I don't think the city should be paying half for
Yeah,
our stuff.
I just
You know, our property.
thought it was,
He said, we don't own it, we will. So,
Well, no,
That makes
not
me
Lyle
wonder.
Road. Well, I guess we do, but I mean,
you know, that's before,
who's the deed in though?
It's in county's name.
it's
Okay,
PVA,
so-
PVA, it's listed under us.
So, the pavilion is listed under the city,
That's correct.
but we paid for half of that.
right.
So,
The one other outlier is Ed Davis, that the city,
Right.
100%, the city funds that operation. But the
so-
rest of them, other than Great Crossing, is jointly funded.
That's correct.
And so, what brought this up is all the things that we've done out at Brooking, I have been under the perception that we had always paid for out there, show barn. I mean, there's been a ton of money,
I'm not sure on that one.
okay.
That
I mean-
came through a grant that we applied for through Parks and Rec, so I'm assuming that came through our budget. I'm not positive on that.
I don't know. but
That was a
I
state
just-
funded grant.
That goes back to, you know, when people start talking about what they spend versus what we spend and, you know, the fairness and everything, it gets really murky because we're spending money, you're spending money, they're spending money, all on a lot of the same things, but there's no master document that shows who spent what where and how much was actually spent on it. So I don't have a problem with the grant, I don't have a problem with the park, I just, we don't know if we're gonna be out 250 or if we're gonna be out 125.
And
What about
that's
that?
correct. We won't know until we know if we get the grant application
What
approved.
about, taking a vote to approve it contingent upon the city picking up the other 125?
Well, I don't think it needs to be contingent on the city picking up the other 125, because it needs to be done. What I'm concerned about is,
So you're right.
that it's in our budget, the two,
So you'd
it
be
needs to be
paying
in there.
500 though?
huh?
I mean, you might be paying 500 if they don't get the grant. So there's gotta be something.
I mean-
We gotta think through this a
No,
little bit.
I'm not saying not apply for the grant, I wanna know
No, I'm
if we're
saying,
paying
if you're not
125
gonna
or
get the city
250.
involved, and we don't get the grant, then you're talking about 100,000 or more for this type of stuff.
But we're just approving the apply for the grant today.
Right.
If we apply for the grant, we don't get it, we don't have to proceed with the.
We go back to step one and figure out what to do.
Well, that's what I wanna make sure is, you know,
Yeah.
if we don't get the grant, then what do we do? You know, where would, she has to come back?
back to
Yes.
the drawing board.
Okay,
I would think I would have to come back.
okay.
And if it's not approved through my budget, I think I would have to come back.
Rick Hostetler.
Just to throw a little more murkiness. I mean, I agree with all this conversation, but ultimately, people in the city, people in the county, in all three cities in the county are gonna have access and use of the park. So it's their money. I get where David's come from, Chad. spending taxpayer dollars. City folks, it couldn't get much murkier. I'm not saying I've got the answer, but, we have done just what David and Chad's talked about. We've done a lot of projects solely for the county, on county property, but then we've already found out that we've actually partnered through Kim's budget on repaving of the tennis courts at Brooklyn, at the county park, right? So we've already, it's a little murky, I guess. I don't have the solution, but just, for me, the overriding thing is it's all the taxpayer dollars.
And it benefits the community.
Right. How we parse this out, I don't have that answer, for sure.
Going back to what Alvin just mentioned, the request is just for permission to apply for a grant.
Correct. I need to submit minutes from this meeting with my grant application that has you guys approving my application because it is your land.
I'll make a motion.
David Livingston makes a motion to approve that. Alvin Lyons, second. Any other questions or comments?
But you also said you're gonna put this in your budget,
It is, it's already in my budget request, which the judge has.
but how will that change if we don't get this grant? That'll just be an issue.
Well, if it's a capital project like that and it's contingent on the grant, my suggestion would be that you hold that money through the fiscal year until we find out.
And reserve for transfers.
Yeah, that would be my
As
suggestion.
long as that's, okay.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Kim, if you'll hang loose, probably at the end, probably talk a little bit about what's on that table there.
Okay.
Number 9, jail fund budget, proposed budget submitted by Jailer Broyles. Let the record reflect that. I think that's all we need to do unless Jailer Broyles would like to make any comment. You're free to make comment that it was submitted.
I appreciate the offer, but no, thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Next, something we've worked on here for some time, ordinance 21-03, first reading. I appreciate everyone's input and everyone's work for this. I think it will make a lot of folks, their quality of life that have to deal with this, might provide some relief. So, Rand, would you read the summary, or are you gonna read the whole thing?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yes, sir.
I like what's in here, except from section 2, number 4, I'm not sure what that second line says there. It's section 2, number 4. Control will take steps impounded, but I was already been impounded. Be clear about that.
Section 2.
I think it should just say animal control will take steps calculated to notify the potential owners of dogs been impounded.
Okay, that's what I thought it might be, that
Yeah, let me drop the word impounded. Control them steps yeah. Thank you, sir.
What page was that on? Page 3?
second page.
Second page.
Section 2, number 4.
All right.
And Stacy, I'll give you I'll correct this and get you a clean copy after our meeting.
Another comment, or a couple of things I saw on page 3, section 6, or, not section, but section 2, part 6. I think you maybe possibly left out a word there as an owner of this ordinance shall be given a written warning.
Yeah, mine says given, is given not in yours?
No.
Stacy showed me that and I added that word.
Okay.
So yeah, it does say.
I printed one off last night, so I got that. Okay.
I may not have
And
said.
then maybe the fine in that same section,
Mhm.
it says subject to a fine, F-I-N-D, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's good enough.
Yeah,
Good enough. I printed mine off too quick last night.
Well, I may not have sent out the final version, but yeah, Stacy pointed was out, we changed.
That's okay, thanks, that's my fault.
Rick, there was another one sent, you just printed the whole one.
Yeah.
What she said.
My mistake.
She
What I
said just there was
I
another,
printed
that
off-
Stacy sent it out, just Rick had accidentally
Okay.
printed out the old one.
All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, ordinance, number 21-03, ordinance relating to harboring of Fisher Samuel, allowing dogs to run large and allowing dogs to engage in no ordinance prohibiting dogs from running at large in the county, whereas there presently exists no ordinance prohibiting persons from letting the dogs engage in detrimental behavior on other people's property, whereas the current ordinance pertaining to harboring of vicious, dangerous animals is inadequate, whereas the Scott County Fiscal Court desires to address these matters in a comprehensive ordinance, now therefore be it ordained by the Scott County Fiscal Court as follows. Section 1, definitions. As using this ordinance, the following words shall be defined and set out herein. 1, dog shall mean any canine 3 months of age or older. 2, owner or keeper shall mean any person or persons, firm, association, or corporation owning, keeping, or harboring a dog. 3, vicious, dangerous animals shall mean any animal that attacks, bites, or injures human beings, livestock, or domesticated animals without adequate provocation, or which, because of temperament, conditioning, or training, has a propensity to attack, bite, or injure human beings, livestock, or domesticated animals. It is not necessary that an animal bite, attack, or injure a human being or domesticated animal on a prior occasion, prior to the incident being prosecuted under this ordinance, in order to be considered a vicious, dangerous animal under its definition. Quarantine shall mean humane confinement of an animal in a secure enclosure from which it cannot escape, and which enclosure prevents the animal coming in unplanned contact with any other animals or human beings. Section 2, shall be unlawful for any owner or keeper of any dog to permit such dog to run at large in any county unless accompanied by the owner or keeper and on a leash. Any dog not accompanied by the owner or keeper and on a leash may be impounded. 2, it shall be unlawful for any owner or keeper to keep or harbor any dog that barks or yelps or otherwise makes such noise as to disturb the peace and quiet of the neighborhood. 3, any complaint lodged with the Animal Control Office concerning a violation of this ordinance shall be investigated by the Animal Control Officer. 4, not later than 3 days after the impounding of any dog, Animal Control will take steps calculated to notify the potential owner that the dog has been impounded. The owner or keeper may reclaim the dog upon proof that the dog has rabies inoculation, payment of all costs and charges incurred by the county for impounding and maintenance of the dog. Any dog not reclaimed within 5 days beginning after the final day of the notice period shall be eligible for adoption or other disposition. 5, the following charges shall be paid to the county for the impounding of any dog. $10, cost of the impounding and pickup, $10, cost of maintenance, $5 per day, and reimbursement for veterinary care and medical expenses. 6, an owner or keeper that violates this section of this ordinance shall be given a written warning for a first offense. Any owner or keeper has a second or greater violation of this ordinance within a 12-month period may, in addition to any cost of impounding, etc., be guilty of a violation. Upon conviction, be subject to a fine of not less than $25, no more than $250. 7, the Animal Control Officer and the Scott County Sheriff's Office shall be empowered to enforce this ordinance. Section 3, shall be unlawful for any owner or keeper of a dog to permit said dog to run at large anywhere in the county while engaged in any of the following. A, damage or disturbing any items of personal property located on any premises other than those owned or occupied by the owner or keeper of the animal. B, running after, jumping upon, chasing, barking at, biting at, or in any way frightening, molesting, or scaring any person other than the owner or keeper of the animal or members of the owner or keeper's immediate family. C, biting, chasing, barking at, attacking, jumping upon, frightening, molesting, scaring any domesticated animal or livestock. 2, any owner or keeper in violation of subsection this ordinance shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. Upon conviction shall be subject to a fine of not less than $100, no more than $5, or be imprisoned for not less than 1 day, no more than 7 days, or both. Section 4, any animal excluding wildlife which is bitten or scratched someone shall be quarantined for 10 days from the time the bite or scratch occurs. Any owner fails to properly quarantine his or her animal subject to some citation for violations, and the animal shall be impounded by the Scott County Animal Control Shelter for the remainder of the quarantine period. The owner keeper shall be responsible for all quarantine fees. An animal whose owner keeper is unavailable or incapable of quarantining the animal may be taken to the Scott County Animal Shelter and quarantined there for the prescribed period. 2, confinement of vicious animals should be unlawful for any person to keep or harbor within the county a dangerous and or vicious animal unless it is at all times kept securely chained within an enclosure in a manner that cannot escape from the owner's premises. If such animal is taken off the property of the owner keeper, it must be muzzled and on a leash or in a secure cage from which it cannot escape. Owner keeper must post visible warning signs at all entries to premises. 3, any owner keeper in violation of this subsection of this ordinance shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. Upon conviction, be subject to a fine of not less than $25, no more than $5, or be imprisoned for not less than 1 day, no more than 30 days, or both, so fined and imprisoned. Section 5, the following section in the Scott County should say sections. The Scott County Code of Ordinance are hereby repealed. 1, ordinance number 92-070 in its entirety. 2, ordinance number 97-02. It should just be 028, shouldn't it, Stacy? I mean, 9702.
Yes.
Got 028 on my copy. Ordinance number 97-02 in its entirety, and 3, Section 8A, B, and C of the Scott County Code Enforcement Board Ordinance 16-10. Introduced, first reading today, April 9th, 1921, or 2021.
Thank you, Rand, and once again, thanks for everybody's input, and our animal control staff, Nathan, Sherry, and all her staff that worked on this, and Jared as well. What other questions or comments does anyone have? Is there a motion to approve? Motion from Rick Costello, a second from David Livingston. Any other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
What's kind of ironic about this, I received a text last night, somebody asking me about a barking dog, and I said, oh, let me tell you.
There we go.
I'm well informed on this subject.
Now, with that said, we'll go to number 11, Animal Control New Hire, Jeff Mudrack.
Thank you, Judge, Court. On behalf of Sherry Bishop, I'm pleased to recommend the appointment of Natasha McDaniel as an animal care technician. She will start at $12 an hour, and Monday, April 26th is her tentative first day of employment. So I present that recommendation to you.
Motion from Alvin Lyons. Is there a second? Second from Dwayne Ellison. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Jail new hire, Jella Broyles.
Good morning, Judge. Good morning, Magistrates. I'd like to present to you all this morning part-time new hire, Ayla Robinson. Ayla worked for us for about a year and a half, had to leave for personal reasons about 2 months ago, and she wants to come back. So she's, what I'm asking for is to hire her part-time at $15.50 an hour.
Was she part-time previously?
She was full-time, right, yeah, and she didn't want to leave, but for personal reasons, she had to leave, and so those personal reasons are behind her, and she'd like to come back now.
Motion from Rick Hostetler. Is there a second? Second from Dwayne Ellison. What other questions or comments would anyone have? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Next, number 13, I presented, last week at our work session, we talked about and presented this agreement, proposed agreement. I have since, we've had a couple of virtual meetings with CTC and Bluegrass Energy as well, and still working on the project, and have one other scheduled with Kentucky Utilities next week, just sharing our project and the potential of how we could move forward together, talking about poll agreements, how they do that, and just different things. But the scope of work with the agreement with CTC Technology is CTC would prepare an RFP and Q&A responses. They would evaluate responses and deliver recommendation. They would task 3, conduct an in-person outside plant survey to add in preparation of the fiber to the home cost estimate. We talked about possibly, they're gonna send 2 engineers, and we had talked about possibly providing 2 drivers with them. They're gonna have very sophisticated GPS and GIS equipment in the vehicle with them. At this time, from conversations with Heather Mills, it looks like they're just gonna end up just sending 2 engineers, and after talking with the engineers, they really feel like they're just gonna drive themselves. They're gonna try to do 12, 13-hour days. They're gonna try to knock it out, and then try to have everything together with this data from the survey plus the RFP by the end of the month. And their folks will be on the ground here and working. I think it was the 16th was what she was trying to get it started with, and that, you know, that is, and then the last task was conduct negotiations and produce a term sheet. You know, the first task is $4,500, second task 10, and then option 2, she said, even though that they're just gonna drive themselves, we'd still go at 22.5 for the survey, the survey that they're gonna do. And then that task 4 would be $10,000 separately as well. What questions or comments does anyone have? Heather is not on the call with us, but she said she would be, you know, available via text if needed, or would jump on. I think Chad said it last week, you know, you're gonna pay now, but you're gonna save later. I still feel very strongly about this. I'm very, very optimistic as well. David Livingston this week, you know, as his role as president of the Magistrates Association, essentially hosted a training. And part of that training, and I think there's great value in going to things like this, at the training, the Department of Local Government was there. And they talked about the regulations for the state, $250 to $300 million that they're talking about for the county grant process. Well, after that person spoke, I was sitting next to Dwayne. I went over and talked with this person that's producing the regulations for the grant, and talked at length, and he agreed to meet with CTC as well to make sure that CTC knows the ins and outs. So kudos to Squire Livingston, and I appreciate his willing to lead. Then, you know, it's nice to have that proximity to be able to reach out to folks, but this is, I'm very optimistic about the funding, and this funding, I still think that we can use this once the dust settles. I still feel like we could use the CARES Act dollars to pay for this consulting and the survey and such. So what questions would anyone have, and would anyone offer a motion?
So can you, well, I'll offer a motion and then discuss. I'll say for approval.
Motion and a second.
So we go through these stages, and just for a Cliff Notes version, where will we be at the end of these stages?
So here's my hope. The end of April, 1st of May, we get the RFP published and out. They are adamant that we leave it out 60 days for review, and then there'll be a question and answer comment session. Then everybody, going back to my man Rick Hostetler, he always talks about make sure we give it to everybody, and you know, those questions and answers will be shared with everybody that wants them. And then at the end of 60 days, I feel confident that we will have, I've already had 3 tell us in the RFI that they want to do the whole county. And I think we'll have competitive offers, and by doing this RFP, I think it's in our best interest to get the best deal possible.
Yeah, but the data that we collect from the engineers coming here, we'll provide that to them too.
Yeah, that whole survey, all that information will be available, and it makes it, we're comparing apples to apples, and everybody's bidding on the same information.
That goes along with David's question, I think, and everything's been said. That's one of the things that, one of the first interviews I sat in on and just listened in on, after it was over, it doesn't matter which one it was, but they had asked about this kind of information, the applicant had. So after they got offline, then CTC was answering our questions. And that's when it came up that if we paid, the court paid to have this survey done and to gather this information, it becomes ours first of all. Because the individual companies that were applying were saying, well, hey, we need this information, but if they do it, it's theirs, and they're not gonna share it. That's understandable. So, and that's what I was talking about with you early on, is if we did this, if the court decided to do it, according to Heather Mills and her team, they kind of recommended it because it would become our information that we could share to everybody, and then everybody goes, well, I got a question on this part. When they ask that question, then that question goes out to everybody and the answer that we give them, through CTC. So that's kind of what that process looks like, and they made that recommendation early on in the process of the interviews. And it just kind of bloomed from there to say, hey, this is what it's gonna look like. So we're looking at, so your motion, just so I'm clear, is for all 4 steps.
Correct.
And I think that's 47-something thousand total there. I think so. So that's just clarification.
But does that clarify where you think we're
Yeah,
going?
and so on the, adding on to the question, so are there pockets within the city limits that this will affect?
I'll use a perfect example. Like, we're gonna survey everything.
Okay.
And we think that that'll benefit us in the long run, and that the possibility that a company might bid to try to put fiber in the city as well. I've got,
I'd be underserved.
yeah, there's underserved areas, and I've been on Zooms with city officials, and their connection terrible on multiple times. This one in particular lives over in Indian Acres. So there's areas that are not, the service is not as good as it needs to be. So this survey will help line it all out.
I ask that because in my neighborhood, I have fiber, but not everybody can get access to fiber in the neighborhood.
And
Makes sense.
I don't understand that.
It's a little bitty line.
Yeah, but just using the Boone County example, they're one ahead of us. You know, they've signed an agreement with Cincinnati Bell. Cincinnati Bell's pledged to put fiber to the home in every unserved business, or underserved business. And they used the figure 40,000. They had identified 40,000 underserved or unserved businesses in homes. And Cincinnati Bell is putting 30 million estimated towards the project. The Boone County Fiscal Court has pledged 13.6. Still haven't been able to get with Judge Moore. Judge Moore's a very, very busy man, but the school board and the library also pledged money towards that 13.6. So I'll be following up on that as we move forward. So what other questions would anyone have? And I can't think of any other project that would positively impact the greatest number of our citizens as what we're talking about doing. Rural, downtown Georgetown, maybe, it's gonna positively impact our community on so many different levels and on the economic development level as well.
It's my understanding, I don't think I'm wrong, after sitting in on several of those interviews, you have made it clear to each candidate that this is a broad yet focused in Scott County.
Oh, yes.
Everything, all points Scott County. This is gonna be, we're gonna get it's gonna be comprehensive.
From Porter and Sadieville to Stamping Ground and over to Leesburg Road. Up and down and.
Down south, all
Yes.
points in between,
So.
it's been made clear.
No, and 3 of the respondents,
I know.
we asked specifically, we wanna do the whole county. And when we started this, and we didn't have this funding that was available when we the picture was different when we started this. And the situation has changed. The availability will never come in our lifetime again. And for us to get this done would be a big thing for our community. So, we've got a motion. We have a second. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you all. I'm excited as we move forward there. Next, Resolution 21-1, Annual Road Aid Agreement. Rand has it. I'll turn over to Rand, and we've already discussed it, but this is just a resolution, kind of just approving the agreement we talked about. Go ahead, Rand.
Resolution 21-1, resolution adopting and approving the execution of the County Road Aid Co-op Program contract between the Fiscal Court, Commonwealth of Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, Department of Rural and Municipal Aid for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021, and is provided in the Kentucky Revised Statutes and accepting all roads and streets referred to therein as being a part of the county road system. Be it resolved by the fiscal court that the fiscal court does hereby accept all roads and streets referred to in said contract as being a part of the county road system. The fiscal court does hereby ratify and adopt all statements, representations, warranties, covenants, and agreements contained in said contract, and does hereby accept said contract. And by such acceptance, it agrees to all the terms and conditions therein stated. The executive of the county is hereby authorized and directed to sign said contract and set forth on behalf of the fiscal court of Scott County. And the county clerk of Scott County is hereby authorized and directed to certify thereto.
Thank you. What questions or comments does anyone have? Motion from Mr. Lyons. Is there a second? Second from Mr. Hostetler. Any other comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Next, new business. I just want to bring up, I sent you all an email. I had Sandra Vernango, our intern, our media intern, she put together an application and a social media post for the Board of Adjustment opening that we have. Talked to Joe Kane about just a general description, and we put that in there with Joe Kane. We posted that, left it on social media, and we had one reply, one brave citizen. And that brave citizen is Rachel Vogt. And we're kind of blessed because she's a very talented and qualified professional. She has a law degree and just has a lot of positives. And I'm glad that we had one response. But I did want you all to know that this wasn't just, we published this and we put it out and had a post, and it was seen by a lot of folks. But, this is not the easiest of tasks to join the Board of Adjustments, and it has some questions. But Rachel contacted, willing to serve. Anybody want to make any comment or question, and would there be a motion? Motion from Rick Hostetler, a second from Chad Wallace. Any other question or comment? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you all. Next, Rick Hostetler, you had some, I've still got a little bit of new business, but I want you to go ahead and talk about yours, and then I'll segue to my next one.
I'll share with the court that our, as you know, the General Assembly, the session's over. They passed a, let me try to condense this. It's, KRS 405.075. Anyhow, it's about newborn infants, and if someone, if a parent, probably in particular if a mother wants to abandon that child, they have provided for a device. They've given an avenue to take it to either a hospital that's willing to participate, a fire department, a police station, I think even a church. I won't go through and read all the particulars, but there's a safety device that they have recommended, and it's a device that they can open the door, put the baby in there. It can be done anonymously. That device, and again, I won't go through all the details, but that device has got to be checked like twice daily at least. But it's also got to be hooked up where it can send an alarm to alert if it's at the police department or at the fire station or wherever it's at. It can be, it will alert the proper authorities. They'll come and check the box and of course, recover the newborn. And it can be done anonymously, and it relieves that individual of any,
Criminal.
yeah, it relieves that individual of any criminal activity, and it saves the baby. And so, I just heard about this earlier this week. I guess I was reading some of the legislation that was passed, and this was one of them. And I thought we might want to consider proactively looking into what that device, I haven't done that, what that device costs, when this actually takes effect. Is this, maybe David or somebody else might know this, I can't, I don't know when becomes effective. I don't think it's right away, yeah, I couldn't find an emergency clause, so, there's a little bit of background to be done, but I wanted to share it with the court members and for us to consider, looking for a location, even talking with the hospital if they're, I don't know,
And Rick and I spoke this morning, and I had actually had a chance to see a TV news segment about this, and they demonstrated how it worked. You go up to a public place like a fire station, and it's marked. You open the door. When you open the door, it's a silent alarm. When you put the infant in there, there's another silent alarm. And then once the door's closed, it locks from the outside. It's locked. And then staff inside can respond. And I think the first thing they do is actually take the infant to the hospital and get a check and then go from there. But Rick, I'd be more than happy to try to gather data, gather some information, and try to. I think it'd be very good to look into possibly trying to implement that into our community. So, any other comments on that?
thank you, Judge.
Yes, sir. I agree with you. Next, Mike is here. Mike, do you care to share your request with the court? Mike sent me an email, and I don't think we've 100% accepted the new rescue truck. I don't think it's
Right, it's still getting upfit.
still getting some upfit. But Mike wants to talk about, there's actually an older truck that's been the backup that would now be a backup that we would look at surplusing, but Mike has a potential use for it, and I'll turn it over to you, Mike.
Thank you. 1991 International truck. It's basically cabin chassis that's got toolboxes on the back. It's not a utility pickup truck. It's a full-size fire truck that has been Rescue 2 since 2006. As we bring Rescue 1, the new 2020 model, online, the current Rescue 1 is going to become Rescue 2, and that truck would become surplus. The way my agency is working right now, we're required to assist with stopping hazmat spills and diverting things. And we currently bring a 4-foot by 8-foot trailer that's loaded with absorbents and pads and all that stuff. It would be a whole lot more efficient if we could use this truck and have it preloaded with an awful lot more equipment, and bring four personnel plus all of the stuff, and not have to worry about somebody hooking a trailer or having to drop the trailer when they get to the incident and move the power unit somewhere else. So from that point of view, that would be very helpful to us. The other thing, kind of a secondary effect, is that we would be bringing a large vehicle that would be a blocker for us for safety. We could park this truck at the end of the incident and be more likely for vehicles to swerve around that than swerve around our SUVs, protecting the incident. So we're asking that we do a lateral transfer from the fire department to EMA for this 1991 International truck. There wouldn't be any cost to the court, except for whatever you would have gotten for surplus value.
What kind of, I guess I'm confused, what kind of truck is it?
Call it a 5-ton. It's kind of like a moving
It's a
truck.
fire truck, right?
Yeah, it's a small fire truck.
But it doesn't have hoses and.
No, it doesn't have
all
any of that. It's just a
slides
whole
up on
bunch
the
of
side.
toolboxes.
Okay, it's just a rescue truck. Got it.
Right,
And it's a 91 model.
And
Right.
so, do you mind if I ask you?
absolutely.
Condition, mechanical condition,
It's not a front line truck like the Harley, but it would.
it would
serve
be
anyone.
safe and serve the
Yes,
purpose?
sir. It's an international 4400.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this isn't something we even need to vote on, is it? Because we vote to surplus it if we just decide to keep it.
Well,
Just keep it.
I think it's in the fire department
That's the-
inventory now. Mike's requesting that we would formally, I couldn't hear you, Stacy.
No vote, I was just switching on our insurance from fire to EMA.
Very good. But, I just, stuff like this, I like to bring it to you all. you all know, and then we go from there.
Cause you know Chad would be the first to call and say, why are we not surplusing this truck?
I like to watch the money.
And I appreciate that. But, you know, like JR, if we surplused it, you know, I've seen as little as $2,000.
Absolutely.
I mean, it'd be, so if, you know, so if no one has any objections, then we'll ask Stacy just to move it over, and once the other truck comes on full time, and then we'll go from there.
Exactly, that works, and then, you know, we'll just, we'll get it striped up to match ours instead of theirs, but, you know, minimal expense out of my budget already, so.
Now, I would ask you to coordinate with whoever's gonna be driving it, that they get some training
Absolutely.
with our, fire department staff.
And, yeah, do you have to have a CDL, or I guess you don't have to have a CDL?
No.
Yeah.
But, it's under 26,000 pounds, so it wouldn't need a CDL anyway,
Okay.
but we are gonna require, driver
Still a big
training.
truck.
Huh?
It's still a big truck.
That's still a big truck. We're gonna require it, and, we're not going to, we're gonna disable the siren on it, so we'll be able to use the emergency lights once it's stopped, but it will not be running, you know, fast and hot. So,
Thank you, Mike.
thank you.
Appreciate what you did. Kim, will you step back up and, you know, David and Dwayne's table, there's, some renderings of some, work that Element Design has shared with the committee. JR, Tim Tevis, Chad and David have been involved, and, myself, and then some folks from citizens from the soccer community, and just looking at the potential of how we would make it most efficient and best use of the property out there to update. And when we started, the conversation was, you know, we want to, Anderson Communities had pledged a roundabout at the entrance. We were going to tie into that roundabout and build a connector road, and then a parking lot, and then a concession stand / restroom, restroom. And that's what we've gotten, and I think we've gotten a very good conceptual plan. But when the dollar figure came, their estimate, you know, I'm trying to pinch every penny, and I about stroked out. And maybe it's because I'm naive. But after talking to some of our court members, they're saying, Joe Pat, you're being you're kind of naive. And I'll you know, I asked Element and Murphy Group to go back and sharpen their pencils and try to redline things that we couldn't, you know, that we wouldn't have to do, because I did not want to come to this court and say, hey, the price tag's $2.6 million. Oh, can we put that in the budget? Because I just don't operate that way. Now, we have talked about Tim and JR serving as our construction managers to try to save us money. After talking with JR and Tim, they both believe that price is elevated. I mean, JR, would you agree with that?
Yes.
And we still want to try to sharpen our pencils, but I wanted to give you an update about what the work was been done, and what was, you know, in my mind, I'd like to put something in the budget to move the project forward for next year. Kim, you know, what are your comments? You've been at every meeting, and I think you're the one saying, Joe Pat, you're naive too.
Well, and other things that we're looking to do to kind of offset that price is apply for a TAP grant, which hopefully that grant cycle is gonna be later in the year. But that will take care of the $98,000 figure that they have on there, because the TAP grant is going to be Legacy Trail based or focused to try to bring the Legacy Trail in from the horse park to that location. So some of the items that they included in this phase 1 would actually be involved in another project that we're looking for grant funding.
But what you're telling me, you know, what we had discussed with the court was that if we move forward and we would try to use this and the money that we put towards this as a match towards a TAP grant. But you're telling me we can apply for, so that TAP grant would really, what you're talking about is some of those items that were listed could be covered under the TAP grant.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, right.
We'd still be just doing one, transportation alternatives
Program.
program.
Is there anything through the transportation department?
That's through the
Oh, that is through transportation?
yes, that is through the
Okay. I was
transportation.
thinking it was through.
And they have told me directly, staff there, to get our application ready and, to have it prepared because there will be a window. Kim and I met with, staff from planning and zoning and, Kim's gonna carry a little bit more than probably, but we already have the old grant that was done once before. We have to update the numbers.
We have an example of a CMAC and a TAP grant that were both applied for this particular project.
So I'm really not asking the court to vote for anything today. I'm just letting the court know where we're at. I'm gonna try to sharpen the pencils, try to get a dollar figure this week that might be closer to reality. And,
What about private owners? There has been discussion on that.
There has been some discussion on that. I know that Georgetown Football Club is looking into private donors for turfing the Field One. I do
That-
have reservations
let
about
me-
those private donors.
yes, let me stress to everybody, this dollar figure
It does not
included
include that.
grading and crowning 2 fields.
That's correct.
And
It does
then
not
Parks and
include
Rec
the
and-
extra stuff.
And the football club, soccer club would seed and take over
The maintenance.
the maintenance. And that didn't have anything to do with anything there.
That's correct.
So-
And it also does not include lights, correct?
But it includes running conduit to where the lights would be. Trying to not do work twice and pay for work twice. And Rick, you would say that'd be smart, wouldn't you?
Friends of the Parks does have approximately just shy of $19,000 that is dedicated towards the construction of the concessions building that they raised through donations.
And I thought there was another donation.
20,000, take off those 2 little things there. I swear to you, you don't want them. I deal with them all the time, they're a pain in the ass.
Well, and I said we don't want it opened,
Yeah.
you know, because bugs would get up in it. We can take it off, Dwayne. Yeah. But all I wanted to do was talk about where we're at. I'm trying to get the pencil sharpened to come back with a little bit better number. Rick?
Back up just a little, you said the seating is a part of,
No.
it's not.
All our commitment would be is grading, the grading and crowning 2 fields.
But there is a group that's, there is a group that's,
Yes, the Georgetown Football Club has been very involved in raising money and to be able to try to do projects like this. It's our largest sport within our community. They have about 1,200 kids a year that go through that program.
And
So-
play out there.
And play out there on those horrible, horrible fields.
Well, it just bothers me, there's no bathroom, and what we're talking about is, it's got a men's and women's bathroom, a concession stand, and then 2 family bathrooms, and then a storage area. And it's 48 by 48, that is, and then they had a 48 by 48 covered patio, covered area. I mean, it can be reduced.
Is there a second story?
Is that upstairs?
That looks like.
There's storage opportunities.
Because the pitch on the thing, he felt like he could have an upstairs storage, and it would just have plywood floor, the trusses would be exposed, and he said nobody would ever say they didn't need extra storage.
That could be the official's room. Let me change.
There you go.
I'm serious.
It could be, but, it's not like it's a Taj Mahal, it's very functional. We turned it around 3 or 4 times and asked him to do a couple adjustments. When you're talking about 1,200 kids going through there, I don't see how we could make it any smaller.
How many parking spaces?
190, 189 somewhere.
Is that, JR, is that right?
150
100.
somewhere, wasn't it?
I think
No, that was-
that plan was
This
hundred and
is the
ninety.
third version.
The third version.
Is it like 190?
Yeah, you're right,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you can never have enough parking.
Yeah.
It's probably, yeah, it won't be enough, that won't be enough,
But
you know, for like
Yeah.
a big event,
What are they doing now? Parking in the field?
parking in the field.
which is fine.
And we're happy with the concept drawing on the concessions building, that it's gonna meet Legacy Trail standards to be able to use it as part of our match.
So it kind of becomes an anchor for that
It does.
park, this.
It does. But if we have to do it in segments, maybe we have to do it in segments. You know, I don't know. But I just wanted you to know where we're at. Kim, anything else you want to add? Chad, you want to add anything?
Well, I want Kim you sent us an email back on December 11th about alcohol at the parks. Would you want to just address that? I know you've talked with David and myself and Joe Pat about it before, but the policy's kind of what happens, what they do down at Royal Spring right now, and things that
Yes.
we should consider.
Yes and no. So, we have had the ability to serve alcohol at events through vendors at Royal Springs since 2016. That was instigated by doing the Seed to Feed and doing concerts down there, and those types of activities that were done through Parks and Rec and Tourism in partnership. Last month, we expanded that opportunity to Brook and Park with a lot more restrictions on it. The new policy is very clear on where alcohol can be served and who is hosting the events that alcohol is allowed to be at. It cannot be athletic events, it cannot be near the playground, it cannot be near the walking trails, and it has to be events that are hosted by either our department or tourism or in partnership. So it's much more restrictive than what the opportunities are down at Royal Spring, but I feel comfortable with that. More comfortable with that because of the multi-use of that park. We do have, playgrounds and we do have ball fields. And, on the judge's recommendation, we did not want to have alcohol available for sporting activities at that park. And it doesn't mean that it can't be changed at a later date as we test it. But yes, but that is something that can be expanded at a later date if we want to.
And if the court so chose to move in that direction, I don't know right now, Great Crossings Park, if we don't have any kind of venues per se that would set up
The only
for.
thing
There
is-
are not fields set up out there
Yeah.
for adult events.
Right, but in the future, that might be something we have.
But I have been approached about like a Seed to Feed down by the creek.
Mhm.
You know, like, but I wouldn't agree to it unless Parks or Tourism was doing it, but that would be something that you all would have to consider, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I just wanted her to,
Expand that policy to have those same restrictions in a different park. If you're talking about doing it by the creek, Great Crossing, part of the creek has always been under our jurisdiction, so it is something that I can address in my policies if you would like me to do that.
Would anybody have any comment to, if there was a formal request to having that at Great Crossing?
Well, I think that needs to be a scenario where you potentially are not, serving full and lots. Full cups and lots of cups. Where there's kind of a Seed to Feed is kind of if you did one down there, it could be like a progressive, or if somebody if they wanted to do a restaurant and brewery and distillery, a progressive walk or something like that, but there would be kind of a limit of what happens.
I mean, but. you know,
I just brought it up because I think it's something that we need to think about, because there's been multiple requests about Great Crossings Park,
It's a beautiful park.
and it's
Yeah.
something we might need to
That's
address.
something that we need to draft a policy for this body.
Since it's under our jurisdiction.
Yes.
Wait a minute, we need to clarify, are we talking about the entire totality, or are we talking just
The great
park and the walking trail?
park in the walking trail area.
Cause see, what I was thinking too is at some point in time, there may be, if we ever built a,
Amphitheater?
amphitheater out there that you could host concerts at,
Yeah.
or plays, or,
That would be,
we'd have to
very-
address
yeah.
that at that time.
I mean, you want us to,
Well, and once again, I'm not for advocating for alcohol to be at athletic events. I think it needs to
No.
follow the
I'm,
policy.
I'm saying the same thing that,
Yeah.
that the Parks and Rec Board has adopted.
We need to have it our,
We could have it Great Crossing Park and then extended by the creek on the walkway and no athletic events, just the same thing you have. I
You
mean,
just have to take a look at the walking trail part, because that is excluded from my policy.
but just the only reason I mention is because I've been asked about, you know, it'd be a nice venue. The park, I mean, it's beautiful down there. What JR and his group did when they came in there and cut all that honeysuckle out and left the big trees. I mean, it made it pretty, didn't it? I mean, it's pretty. So
Gorgeous.
we'll talk more. Any other questions or comments there? Thank you, Kim. Now, the next thing is kind of like, I would like to call a special call work session on Thursday at 3.
we do it 3:30.
3:30 be fine with me. Anybody have any objections? Try to do an hour. And between now and then, I'll try to send you data and information from the budget committee for you to review, and then you can have questions, we can have comments. And then we have a whole week between next Thursday and the 22nd to then get ready for, you know, our first reading. And Jeff and Michelle and I and the budget committee has met probably 4 times now. We have, you know, looked at numbers, we've looked at revenue, we've looked at requests from constitutional officers and requests from departments, and just trying to nail all that together. Any questions or comments about that? I'll get that advertised and posted and do it
It's 3
3.
PM, right?
Chad requests 3:30,
Or 3:30, because I put 3:30 AM, so.
so, okay.
Can we make it full?
But we'll do 3:30 and we'll share information. And then along those lines, you know, we had a capital projects committee that worked together and put together a presentation. We had a public meeting at Great Crossing High School, and then COVID hit and everything froze. And, you know, in those conversations, we talked about capital projects. In the budget that we have now, many of those, you know, like JR, give you an example. JR has listed priority of a brush truck and a dump truck, single axle, you know, trying to catch up where we were on those lists of requests, and all those requests were compiled together. Well, we've all talked about the future potential need of a jail and the need that we need to look at there. We've talked about that previously. We talked about a feasibility study for that, and I couldn't meet with him, but going back to David's work this week, David, would you share your conversation with Michael Meredith that you were able to have?
Sure, they, of course, Mr. Meredith, chairs the jail task force committee, and he spoke to the judges and magistrates this week, and I spoke with him afterwards, and, basically, in a nutshell, what he said is they are still the task force is still working. They were not completely prepared to submit any kind of law changes or, anything like that with regards to, inmates, jails, time served, crimes, anything like that. They're still working on that. They're gonna be having some interim meetings going forward and hope to be able to file that for next session. My question to him was, and this was asked publicly, this question was, what about counties that are considering expanding or building new jails? And his response was, I would wait.
So, Jailer Burrows,
Especially if you're building in expectations of potentially housing state prisoners to have revenue to offset.
and that's not our reality.
Right.
But nobody in this room disagrees that sooner than later, we're gonna have to address facility need at the jail. But I think it is prudent to wait a year and come back in January after the session, January, February, and have more conversations about a real feasibility study and what we know then.
And I think we'll know more about the jail task force because they'll pre-file a bill probably September, October, November. So at that point in time, we'll know what they're looking at and we can have conversations with them as
And
we
then,
go.
and then, there was a mention, Rick mentioned, and it was mentioned that when we had gentlemen, the regional question, that could be discussed as well and more information gathered. But, Joe LaBrosse, I know it's important to you, and, I feel like we've tried to gather information and try to look at capital needs as we go forward. And but we couldn't do anything if we don't do the facilities, the feasibility study. So I still think we push pause, we come back in January, February, and we put in the budget for next year, the feasibility study, and have it ready to go. And by then we'll see post-COVID what numbers are doing at a daily minimum down there at the facility. The next part of the capital projects discussion that was mentioned of buildings, we talked about an EMS station. There's a real need. I've talked with Chris Runyon about this. I've talked to our former director. And the general area would be out on the east side, past Toyota, past, near the interstate. But the logic would be that would be a partnership with us in the city, and they'd be building a fire station, we'd be building, the EMS, and that's the logic. Doesn't have to happen that way, but they're not really kind of at that point to where they want to move forward there. I think we could move forward if we wanted to, but it's probably good to pause on that for a little bit. I think we can pause. But the other thing that has been mentioned is in the Capital Projects Committee was a sheriff's office facility. And I've been down there here lately. They have outgrown that facility. They don't have room for storage. They don't have room for meeting. They don't have room for training. That is a reality right now for them. The other aspect of this was not really mentioned that much in the Capital Projects Committee was just our situation with our county clerk's office. If anybody's been here over the last several months since COVID's kind of loosened up, we have tried our best downstairs to keep people spread out. The clerk has a desk, and when people come in, they tell them what they want to do, and then as motor vehicle clerks inside work through, they call them back and they send them back, so there's not a big crowd of people in the work area, and they flow through and out, and there's really no easy way. They have to go out the door they came in, and quite often there's people backed up out the door or going down the steps towards the basement. So in my opinion, I would like the court to look at, what are the true needs, not the wants, the needs of a sheriff's office and a possible combined building that would house a county clerk's annex satellite office at the end. And Gerald's been involved in conversations. Gerald, would you like to address the court and say anything about where you all are and what your feelings are on the issue? I've talked with Sheriff Hampton at length about it. And then, trying to kill two birds with one stone, if you built a building like this and you had a county clerk's annex in it, you'd have a drive-through area at the end that could do motor vehicles and then possibly also accept tax payments. And Gerald, I'll let you make comment.
Yeah, that's fine, Judge. Thank you in the court. I think over the past several years, realistically, we've discussed at length about what it is that we need and the growth of our office and again, just what we need as far as space goes, different things that are coming about in law enforcement that, nationally, to some degree, that are causing us to conduct a lot more training, to do a lot more kinds of moves. I don't know if any guys have watched any of this trial of the Derek Chauvin thing in Minneapolis, but that department is getting hounded on their policy and, even more importantly, this week, on their training. It's a huge issue in law enforcement nowadays, especially when it comes to any kind of liability thing. So as we've brought up before, again, we're out of space. I have people piled on top of people that should have office space for the assignments that we've given them to do. We don't have any room to put them to do that. I've got guys that are keeping stuff and doing a lot of their work in our command staff that are doing stuff at home because they don't have any place to do it or keep all of this stuff in the office. We've talked about a lot of that stuff. So it's just, we feel it's reached a point where we need to be in a position where we can better serve the community by having an area to do a better job of handling the public when they come to see us. Our lobby is tiny. People come in to pay taxes, and there are times that we've got people standing outside waiting to come in because there's only room in there, especially during COVID. We've cut it down to where you can only have 2 people in our lobby at a time because it's small. So again, we have people waiting there.
It's just a true need on several different levels.
Several different levels, and that's what I said. And the judge came up with the idea of including an area in the building that the county clerk could use, and I think the sheriff and I both believe it'd be an excellent idea. Kind of makes it a one-stop shop for vehicle licensing, where we do the inspections, and then now they come to our office to inspections, and they have to come up here and find a place to park, and go into the clerk's office and finish getting their title application, all that kind of stuff. If we can put that all in one area, that saves a lot of that. And plus, getting us and that section of the clerk's office a little bit out of downtown, providing a little more parking and all that kind of thing. I think the public would take huge advantage of that. I think there are a lot of pluses. It's a lot of needs. Again, as y'all addressed, and Kenna and Rebecca and us have talked about the fact that they're busting out of this building also, the county clerk's office, so that will give them a little more space.
Thank you. You have a question?
One discussion that we had a lot of was when the Justice Building was built and all the space that is then created.
And that's, Dwayne, that's still an option. But in my opinion, I don't think that option is the best because we'd outgrow that within a short time too, I think. And the other option with that,
It depends on how you remodel or
yeah, and you got 2 floors with basically 2 courtrooms and a couple offices, and the first floor's got the circuit court clerk in there right now with, but in my opinion, and we could certainly ask an architect to tell us how much it costs to retrofit that, but and if that's something the court wants us to do, we certainly can. One other possible thought process, and I've mentioned this, but you could renovate and make the courtrooms into offices and look at the Commonwealth's attorney as a possible renter, the public defender as a possible renter of a second floor, CASA of Lexington. There's a bunch of opportunities where I don't see the current Justice Center as being as flexible for growth and then for the training and the storage and like.
Yeah, and part of that is, it's again, one of those things where as the community continues to grow, our office, through your all's help over the last several years, has continued to grow. By doing that, all of that, it's created even more for us a parking issue around our office.
But if the court wanted, you know, what I was getting ready to propose, you know, I've talked to a couple architects. One in particular gave me you know, they would do a needs assessment, pretty much like a feasibility study for about, you know, less than $10,000. And what they would do is, you know, they'd come in, they'd do a meeting, make goals and objectives. Then they'd come down and observe the operations of the sheriff's department, survey the sheriff about needs and what they think are areas would be priorities. Observe the county clerk's office, do the same thing, look at operations, meet with personnel and look at goals, and then compare data from similar facilities about square footage, security, relationships, operating costs, and then look at potential sites. And in my opinion, we own property at Great Crossing Park, right across from Great Crossing High School. I've talked to the sheriff, and for so many reasons, that location, because we already own it, but the location across from the biggest high school and near elementary, near other schools, for safety purposes, putting that office would make so much sense for school safety. But the rest of this, we could go and ask, as part of this, we could add, look at our current Justice Center, tell us how much it would cost to come in, retrofit to try to meet the needs. We could look at that, and then you could compare the cost of that to the cost of building a new one.
Dwayne, I've advocated to the judge, and we don't necessarily see eye to eye on this, is to possibly look at an expansion of the jail into where the current Justice Center is. I think he's got a valid argument. It might be cost prohibitive.
And I talked to CMW Architects who built it, and I think Darren was there. The cost to retrofit something for corrections is just astronomical. And in my opinion, it would not make Fiscal, it wouldn't make, because we would grow out of that just so quick as well, I think. You know, I don't think you could add enough beds to justify the expense.
Yeah, but there may be a way to use some of that space for the jail, like not the whole thing, but possibly some of the jail to use part of that, offices or training or something.
So we could ask an architect to do a needs assessment on that as well. You know, or an assessment and give us a little bit of it. But me just telling what I feel like is that the cost would be prohibitive for corrections. Mr. Taylor Broyles wants to speak now.
But that doesn't mean that we can't, I mean, we're all trying to make things better, but
This was my, how did you get wedged into my? We already talked about tabling the jail.
Exactly, I heard, and I respect that opinion, and, I gotta say, many of our needs are the exact same as the sheriff's office. We don't have storage room, we don't have training area, we don't have a break area. Our people can't get away from, their work environment except to step, which I prefer for them not to do, but they step outside for breaks. So we've got many of the same needs. Is it possible that some of our needs could be met by expanding, maybe not with security apparatus, but expanding into the current justice building to meet some of those needs? Absolutely, that's a possibility. To expand our security apparatus into the current justice building, I think is cost prohibitive, as underscored by CMW. But we've got a lot of other issues down here too. Our Sally Port only lets one vehicle in at a time, and multiple other issues that would not be addressed by just expanding.
And I don't think anybody disagrees. I don't think anybody disagrees that sooner than later. I think you know, but I'm all willing to, if you want us to look, we'll look. And Dan, go ahead and say what else, anything
No,
else you want to say.
that was it. I do think it's a possibility what Mr. Wallace suggested. Could we expand part of the jail, not the security apparatus of it, into the Justice Building and alleviate some of the issues that we have at the current jail? Absolutely, that would be a possibility.
One other thing that, Michael Meredith said, that just popped in my mind, he specifically addressed pre-conviction and post-conviction. And that those are state inmates, and the state should be taking care of those, not, look, we're all taxpayers to the state, but it should be taxpayer monies at the state level that should take care of those, not at the local level burdening the expense of those.
Right. I would say the pre-conviction, if you're talking about somebody who has not previously been convicted of a state crime, pre-conviction, those obviously are not classified as state inmates.
Right.
They're county inmates until they're convicted, the disposition of that felony crime, and when they're found guilty or they plead guilty to that felony, that's when they get reclassified.
And
as
his
a felon
argument,
or as a
from
state
what I
inmate.
gathered from his argument was the state is not paying enough post-conviction
Oh,
to the
absolutely.
jails. They
Absolutely.
need to be taking care of that
That's
burden, not.
Yeah, the per
leaving
diem
it up
rate
to
is
local
30,
courts.
yeah, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Mr. Livingston, but the per diem rate is $31.34 a day to house a state inmate. That hasn't been raised until this year. This session, they raised it $2. But it hasn't been raised in 14, 15 years. The state, in my opinion, has been ripping off the counties because they're keeping that rate 15 years ago. They've kept that rate the same for 15 years while all of our costs have gone up.
Right.
So the reality is, like, I am working as hard as I can with the project development board to nail down a site for the new Justice Center. And the reality is, even if it goes just smooth as, as my head, it's gonna be 3+ years. It'll be 3+ years before they open the doors to a new Justice Center, in my opinion. Rick, you tell me, because you have knowledge of building and you're involved in that kind of work. I just,
18 months to 2 years.
the timeline that's been shared is 24 to 36 is what's, and it's just,
You don't even have land yet.
we don't even have the site yet. So your reality, that where you're at, in Gerald's reality with the sheriff's office, the timing is all, all those things. And do we want to wait that long to make movement? And I would venture to say that you'd say, Joe Pat, I don't, we want to move in a more, move quicker. And I'd say you would say the same thing.
I would just say that it is a liability for the county for us to remain overcrowded. And we're overcrowded today. We're 20-some% overcrowded today.
What's your number today?
It's 100.
It was 103 earlier today. It may have gone down. But at the 86, if you use 86 as the number, then you're talking 102 is 20%. So that's my concern. I agree. Sheriff Hampton needs a new facility. We need a new EMS facility, all of that.
Nobody here is disagreeing with there's a need at the jail. But there's unanswered questions that I think make us wait until next January, February to really dig in on what we're gonna do.
And I think between now and then, we need to make ourselves part of that equation with that task force. We need to go ahead and push ourselves into that discussion and our local state elected
But
officials.
do we, in the meantime, want to tackle a need that's been identified and try to get hard data on how much, what's really needed, and then what it would really cost, and then try to move forward, and in the meantime, try to knock one of these off and check the box, and then you have one less thing to worry about when you have to tackle the big one that could be 20 million to 25 million. And I'm just talking reality.
I don't know if you're not talking a big project on any of the three.
Oh, the sheriff's like, it's gonna be $8 million. I mean, I'm just,
Spent $3 million on
I ain't,
bathroom.
well, I'm not spending, but Dwayne, I'm not gonna spend that on that. I won't,
Just telling you, it's expensive, and, an easy thing to look at is whatever Georgetown Police Department, I'm sure you're not gonna want a whole lot less than what they have, if not more. if not
I think the
exact same.
square footage would be similar, the finishes,
Well, with the square footage is what drives it, so if you say square footage, they can say, all right, it's whatever, $200 per square foot.
It's gonna be 225, 250 square foot
Right.
probably.
So whatever their size is, there's your price tag right
but
now.
but here's what I need to ask you all to tell me. Do you wanna address a need now? Or do you wanna kick the can down the road and just wait till next year? And that's what I need you all to tell
I'd
me.
like to know a little bit, I don't know enough about the layout of their place. I don't know enough about the layout of how the Justice Center could or could not alleviate plans. I don't know enough about what other programs we could use for, to me, drug-related programs that would help offset and get, we haven't had a lot of time to see the ankle monitoring thing that we instituted really get in effect, right? We haven't seen that really go anywhere yet that I know of.
There's not, I mean, it's
A lot of unknowns.
it's a minimal
All
number,
three.
and Darren could tell us a little bit more about our numbers, but our numbers have not been that high. I've looked at the bills. And then the Shepherd's House is getting its feet wet, and
Right.
COVID has not helped, but don't ever fear though, the reality of folks facing addiction's not going away.
No, it's huge.
And so we know, and everybody in this room agrees that we have real needs, not wants, needs. I'm asking you, what direction do you want me to get data for you to help you all make decisions about what need needs to be addressed?
But the needs for the sheriff's office is not gonna change, and so moving forward, we can find out what their needs are. Now, does it fit in the Justice Center, or does it fit in the new building? I think that's kind of what you're asking, right, is do we wanna move forward to get the needs assessment done?
And we can include, go in the current Justice Center and tell us, could the needs of a future sheriff's office be met in the current Justice Center? I do believe we could do that. And then we could also look at, what would the first floor look like if it was given to the jail, just as a temporary, area for them to have to address non-security issues. I think we're wasting money if we try to talk about retrofitting that building for correctional purposes. Now, the other part, if y'all want me to go down that road, I will. But I think Darren would agree with me, and what CMW told me, and Jared, I don't know if you were sitting in that meeting or not, but, they felt like to try to retrofit it for correctional purposes would be it'd be very expensive.
And it wouldn't address all of our needs at the jail with a larger sally port, a secure perimeter.
And then we outgrow it
Right.
in the short time.
Well, not only that, but just the whole, technology aspect of it. It's not
Yeah.
gonna solve your future technology needs, where if we did build something down the road larger, you can set it up to where you can upgrade those things in a
So,
easier.
I could get a
Can I
couple,
throw something else in?
Yes, sir.
Judge? Also, I know we need a new EMS center, certainly a new sheriff's office, new jail, but, just thinking, keeping this, in mind, access to EMS being close to the jail is extremely beneficial for the jail. When we have a call, an emergency at the jail, they are literally minutes away to assist our personnel with a medical need down there. And if there was any way, thinking down the road, that EMS could be close, a new EMS station or EMS period could be close to the jail, it just has untold countless benefits to have them that close to our facility, when there's a medical need.
but if you were giving your opinion to the court about a future location of a correctional facility that the county owned and operated, it wouldn't be inside the city limits downtown here. It would be, you've told me, tell me, just share, what's your thoughts? I hear what you're saying about being close to an EMS station, but it would need to be outside where it would be a secure perimeter. What else have you?
Yeah, so certainly being in the CBD or the downtown area has a lot of negatives. It's got some benefits as well. Greatest benefit of our current location is the location to the courts. It is the securest way that we can transfer inmates from our secure facility to the court system is literally walking them through a couple of doors and they're in the courtrooms. With that being said, that's the greatest benefit. There are umpteen negatives to it, and one is not having a secure perimeter around the facility and not being able, with our current location, being able to expand, not being able to keep our programs and our inmates all together, transporting them to where we have other programs like the chicken coop. It would be very beneficial to have all of that on one site.
Inside one fence.
Inside one fence. And it's safer for the inmates, it's
just-
safer for our staff.
I just wanted to mention that
Yeah, and so
publicly.
County Station 1 is where I have discussed, only because the county has land already out there. There's room for us to do multiple things that, all in one place.
The only bad thing about that is there's no sewer.
No sewer, correct.
So, anyway, all I want you all to tell me is how to proceed with getting you the information you want. I think my recommendation would be to get, maybe a couple quotes on
Is this let me interrupt, is this also a city discussion to be had?
No.
They're not involved at all?
no.
I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
sewer, I mean,
We can invite them to be part of it.
But they would decline our offer to dance.
If you turn it into a parking and rent property, can we get a land and water?
Y'all, I've got
a
a,
seesaw on one side.
Rick,
So, answer your question from my point of view, it sounds like through all of this discussion, the main problem we have with everything we've talked about is space. And there's, like Dwayne said, y'all haven't identified the property. I know you've got, aren't you looking at three possible locations?
we've identified at priority one. There are other options, but until it's
Yeah, and I know you can't get specific.
appraisals and
Right.
all those are done.
Well, here's my point. So, if we decide to let the sheriff's department rise to the top of this as the most, if we decide that, the most current and present need, that, and if we went elsewhere, outside of downtown, for example, property that the county already owns out by Great Crossing High School, then that right there in one fell swoop, if we did that, opens up a little piece of property, because the courthouse, or the new justice building, is still gonna require parking that we're gonna be limited on, no matter what property you put it on. You're not really gonna get to add a lot of parking. You're still gonna need all this that we have over the hill. So I'm just thinking, from what I'm hearing, that it sounds like that the sheriff's department need is kind of rising to the top because of a couple of things. It would open up a space, if we went that way, it would open up property. It would open up space that could be used in all these other endeavors. It would, I think one thing you didn't mention, Chief Porter, is your deputies are not with the rest of your staff. Their offices are in another location.
Detectives.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
That's fine.
They're in the top of the museum.
Yeah.
Night at the
detectives-
museum.
The detectives, and I know with the agent.
And you don't wanna be up there at night. Believe me. My detectives won't go in there at night.
And they got guns?
Yes.
So.
Apparently you can't shoot ghosts.
Space.
That's just what I'm hearing and that's just what I'm hearing. We're looking for space, literally, not property, space for our workers in the jail, everything. So
So
the sheriff's department were to rise to the top, if that's what was decided, and it went somewhere else, we've started to open up space.
So,
I think we're looking at all three needs, and I don't know if it has to be nailed down to the dollar, whatever, but I think there's gotta be an overall, maybe it's a 5-year plan type of thing is what we're really looking at.
so, would you all like me to talk about, do you, when I have the conversation, do you all want to include the current Justice Center, as looking at the needs assessment of the sheriff's office compared to a new building, knowing that it'll be 3 years down the road before that could be, even an option to be renovated? Is that what you want me to do, or do you want us to focus a needs assessment on a different location and a new building?
My personal opinion is the latter, because we may not be here in 3 years once the Justice Center's open, and that'll be up to that court to decide. But I think we still need to put it into the equation.
Dwayne?
So are you looking for a vote today, Judge, on that?
Not really. I was wanting direction, and like, I could go back to the architect that I've talked to about, and I made clear when I talked to the architect about the need, he offered a needs assessment, because I was asking questions about fees and timelines, and he said, oh, we can do a needs assessment for you. And I said, well, I want to make sure that you understand that whatever we choose to do down the road, it's going to be competitively bid out. Just making sure everybody knows that. I can go back and say, I can get, a needs assessment done on what I've just described about sheriffs and a county clerk, and we could say, hey, can you go down and look at the Justice Center and give us a ballpark? Would that meet the future needs of a sheriff's department, or if we wanted to put, a floor for use of a jail, for non-security purposes? It sounds like you want me to kind of add that in the conversation.
So
And I'm just,
what was their fee?
It was less than 10,000.
Especially if they would include assessment.
And I might be able to squeeze them. So,
Why don't you let this digest a little bit, and then we'll deal with it at the
I just,
Thursday night meeting.
all I was trying to do is get a general thing out on the floor for us to, I didn't want to vote,
And we gotta figure out basically.
but y'all understand where we're at.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So-
they're not going away.
No.
They're only gonna get worse.
And we don't have to worry about having, well, we gotta make sure we have this in the budget. We can amend the budget if we have to. So, with that said, I'm 20 minutes late for a meeting. If anybody has anything else,
I'll just tell you the,
oh, Dwayne, graduation parade.
We did that last year because of COVID. A lot of people wanted to do that again. So we are gonna do that again for graduation, city, county, everybody's helping out, fire, and police forces. So that's the 19th, May 19th, that's probably 6:30. So, if you're gonna go anywhere on the bypass that day, forget it. There'll be about 600 to 700 cars there with,
Both schools?
all three.
All three.
Considering the meetings at the same time, so all three can just be one time instead of 3 times like we did last year. So,
Thank you.
Motion.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second, David Livingston. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. We are.